Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Ryan Tillman with another episode of Tillman's Take. So what I want to debrief today is actually something that I posted a couple days ago, and it refers to the Parkland shooting, and that's Deputy Scott Peterson, who many believe should have went in and intervened when there was an active shooter on the campus. Now, when this happened a few years ago, there were 17 students that were actually killed, and I believe it's students and staff, after this active shooter occurred. And what the debate is whether or not that SRO had an obligation to intervene when the shooting was going on. So let's go back to many years ago, actually when I was in middle school and the Columbine shooting happened. Well, the standard protocols and procedures for police response when a situation like that would happen, let's say an active shooter would happen, would be police officers would show up, they would establish a perimeter, they would call in maybe a SWAT team, maybe some special forces or special unit teams, they would set up a strategic strategy, and then they would insert themselves into the situation and try to stop the threat. Well, what they learned from that situation was, as it took that long for them to set up and, develop whatever plan they had, people were actually being harmed and losing their lives. And so after that, a lot of the training has since changed. Some of the training has now evolved into, if there's an active shooter that occurs, I'm personally trained to, as soon as my next partner arrives on scene, it is our job and duty to go find out where that shooting is coming from and to stop that threat as immediate as possible. Now, that may mean I'm undergunned or I don't have the same, weaponry as that the assailant may have, but you know what? It's my job to go and try to stop that threat. Well, when we look at the Parkland shooting, that didn't necessarily happen that day. And I've actually done a lot of research on this one. I've actually listened to some of the audio tapes that came out. I actually watched the surveillance footage, and it does look like Deputy Scott Peterson goes the other way when there's actually shooting that's occurring on campus. And if you actually listen to the radio log of it, he actually, it doesn't sound like he's actually setting up a perimeter as opposed to trying to go find this person and take out the threat. Now, what the debate is whether or not Scott should be charged for basically failing to intervene and acting negligently when it comes to the safety of the students on campus. So, two things we have to look at is, what's his lawful obligation and does he have a moral obligation? Well, surprisingly so, there is actually case law out there. It's actually Warren v. DOC, which is the District of Columbia, and that actually came to us in 1981. And what that case law establishes is that police officers do not have a lawful obligation to intervene to save any member of the public unless there's a certain or specific type of relationship that has been formed. And that could actually go both ways in this situation. What it basically means on face value is if Scott Peterson didn't intervene that day, but technically per the law, he's not necessarily in violation. However, if he's established some type of relationship with people on campus, then he could be in violation of that law. Now, you ask me as a school resource officer, I would like to say I have an established relationship and an obligation to the people on my campus. Therefore, that means I've actually gone out there, I've sat down with some of these students, I've sat down with some of the staff, and they have brought me onto their campus as my permanent assignment for however long to make sure that I'm providing safety to that campus. And if an active shooter occurs and I do not insert myself into that situation to intervene and stop the situation, then I have now failed at my job and failed at my responsibility, one thing that I have upheld to do if that situation occurred. Now, let's move over to the moral obligation. If you have somebody morally, do you think that Scott Peterson should have intervened himself in that situation? Many people, if not 100% of people, are probably going to tell you yes. Now, I'm going to break this down from a father standpoint. As a father having 3 children, if there was an active shooter that occurred at my children's school and I knew there was an SRO on campus, am I going to be upset if I found out that SRO did not intervene and stood outside while people were being inside, my kids potentially being murdered? I am going to be upset is not even the word, because I can't describe it. So for the parents out there that actually suffered loss in the Parkland shooting, my heart goes out to you, because I can't understand, or I can't even imagine how you feel right now. So I would say morally, yes, there is a complete obligation to intervene yourself in a situation, especially as a school resource officer, because when people look at a school resource officer, they should look at the situation and say, that is one of my safety nets in the event that an emergency should occur, such as an active shooter. But again, it's surprising that, to think about it, the law actually states that you have no lawful obligation to intervene in a situation like that unless there's a relationship that evolves. And so if we look about our job on so many different factors, it actually goes back to the technicalities that we have to deal with as police officers. On the surface, as a police officer, it seems like our job can be very easy. It seems like we show up to work, we go arrest people, we take people to jail, and we come back and we go do the next thing after that. It's not that easy. We are forced to learn case law. We are forced to learn police policies. There's so many things that we need to learn on a day-to-day basis so that way we can be equipped to do our job. I'm going to leave you on this note, and I had a discussion with my wife one day, and it was actually kind of saddening and disheartening. My wife said, hey, Ryan, if there's an active shooter on your campus, what are you going to do? And I told my wife, babe, I have a moral obligation to protect those on my campus. And sometimes that moral obligation means that I have to put other people's lives before my own family, before my own kids' needs. And unfortunately, that may mean me losing my life at the hands of somebody else because I was trying to protect the students on my campus. And that was very hard for my wife to stomach. When I took that badge and I took that oath to be a police officer, a public service officer for you guys, that's one thing that I signed up for. And in my mind, I have ran through scenario after scenario after scenario of what am I going to do should an active shooter occur on my campus? And I've actually had to imagine myself actually running towards the bullets instead of away from it. I can tell you that if I was at SRO on campus, you have my word that I will be going towards those bullets. And it's as hard as it is for my wife to stomach that, and as hard as it is for my kids to stomach that, that's the reality of it. But per the law, do I have an obligation to do so? Not necessarily. So we talk about moral and lawful obligations, and in this one, it's kind of split. So the only thing I can tell you is that a lot of times when I have to think about the decisions I make, I have to fall back on a moral obligation. Yeah, I'm always going to operate as much as I can within the confines of the law, which means case law and police policy. But at the end of the day, if I can answer to myself and I can answer to my God in heaven, did I act morally okay in that situation? I should be confident in that answer. Because I truly believe in one way or another, if it's not in this lifetime, I will be held accountable for every decision I make. So I hope this clears up a few things for you guys today. This is just a brief breakdown of that Parkland shooting and what occurred on that day. I'm not here to, badmouth anybody or badmouth anybody's actions, but what I am here to do is bring to light what policy says, what case law says. So thanks again. I hope this helps. God bless, and I'll see you guys on the next Tillman's Take.